There is no doubt the CJNG is currently one of the most powerful cartels. Traditionally, cartels get their money from drug operations and extorting hardworking citizens across Mexico. However, the CJNG has found a new way of making money. This operation is easier and more profitable than any traditional operation. It's extorting Americans in their own homes. These aren't just any Americans. These are Americans that live in Mexico permanently or have a timeshare in Mexico where they spend the winter months. Before I get into details of this horrific scam, I'm gonna break down some background of the CJNG. The CJNG started with one man named El Mencho. El Mencho was an ambitious and mysterious character that was once an avocado farmer but quickly got involved in cartels, as cartels had their foot in the profitable avocado business. So if you eat avocado toast, you're supporting the cartels. Anyway, El Mencho worked with different cartels, oftentimes illegally entering the USA to take out his drug operations. El Mencho was arrested and deported multiple times, and the last time he was deported, he decided to stay in Mexico as it was easier for him to get away with his operations. He was first working with a smaller cartel called the Millennial Cartel. This is where he learned the ways of the cartel and got a taste for the lifestyle. However, the leader of the Millennial Cartel was arrested, which left the Millennial Cartel in a vulnerable state. Other cartels like Los Zetas were putting their foot down, and El Mencho realized that the Millennial Cartel would be decimated from the Los Zetas. This made El Mencho move to Guadalajara, where he linked up with the powerful cartel named the Sinaloa Cartel. The Sinaloa Cartel had a strong leadership and reputation. The leader of the cartel was no other than El Chapo, one of the biggest cartel leaders in the world. However, later on, the current boss of the Millennial Cartel was arrested, and El Mencho saw this as an opportunity to be the leader of the Millennial Cartel. Well, this pissed a lot of people off. A lot of the cartel members accepted El Mencho as their new leader. However, some members felt resentful as they thought they should be the boss. This made the cartel split into two, one side being Los Resistencia and the other being Los Metazetas, which translates to the Zeta Killers. El Mencho was the leader of the Zeta Killers. Long story short, La Resistencia was destroyed by Los Metazetas. They were killed, arrested, and in general just slapped around. El Mencho worked alongside all these men at one point in the days of the Millennial Cartel, so he knew all sorts of information about them and turned that over to the police. In the cartel world, this is seen as snitching and something you should never do, but El Mencho didn't give a fuck. He wanted power, money, Latinas, jewelry, houses, animals, and he will stop at nothing to get it. This left El Mencho with his own cartel where there was no members that disagreed with him. El Mencho took these members and brushed them up. He made them take on a military style where they dressed like military men, used military style vehicles and weapons. And then boom, the CJNG was born and more powerful than ever. Despite working alongside El Chapo in the Sinaloa Cartel was now the biggest rival of the CJNG. One of the advantages of the CJNG had was their production of synthetic drugs like meth and fent. You see, when El Mencho visited the USA back in the day, this was a time in the USA when drugs like meth were quickly rising among the public. A lot of people were taking meth. It was in the 80s. Therefore, when he came back to Mexico, he had knowledge on how to produce these substances. Other cartels lacked this knowledge, which made the CJNG a lot more money than them. And boom, El Mencho would take this money and invest it right back into the cartel, buying bigger vehicles, guns, and general equipment. Quickly becoming more powerful than their rivals, El Mencho had another bright idea. This was to conquer Mexico. He would move into other states and let the cartels know they have two options. First option is to join his rapidly growing cartel, or the second option, get shot in the face. This created an all-out war in Mexico, but the winner was always the CJNG. In a way, it was kind of like franchising. They would approach cartels giving them the option of joining them or being killed. And when the cartel would decide to join them, they were now under the name of CJNG. When a cartel leader would refuse the offer of joining the CJNG would shoot the leader in the face and ask the same question to the second leader in command. Oftentimes, the leader would be shaking at the legs, seeing what just happened to the other leader, and they would fold and become the CJNG. It was a very efficient business model by the CJNG. Very quickly, they were expanding their operations from state to state. But things got really twisted when they started moving into resort areas where tourists were enjoying margaritas on the beach. These areas got most of their income from operating resorts or restaurants, and the CJNG wanted their piece of the pie. Okay, let's get into the scam. The CJNG would gather information about Americans living in the area in timeshares. If you don't know what a timeshare is, it's basically when someone buys a house and they own it for like 6 months of the year, and the other 6 months someone else owns it. This is popular with Americans because in the winter it gets kind of cold in America. So they buy a house in Mexico for maybe like 6 months, and then 6 months they live in the USA, and then 6 months they live in Mexico. Anyway, keep in mind, these were very wealthy Americans, and that got the CJNG excited. One area that CJNG loved was Puerto Vallarta. This was a huge tourist destination where a lot of wealthy Americans fall in love with Mexico and decide to buy a timeshare on a property. How this works usually is call centers. A call center would call an American and try to sell them a timeshare. Because of a lot of Americans were buying timeshares, there was a lot of information on these Americans, and the CJNG would visit these call centers and give them two options: work for the CJNG or get shot in the face. Before you knew it, the CJNG was operating all these call centers. They would find individuals who would speak perfect English and tell them to call Americans who own timeshares and inform them that they found a buyer for their timeshare. What would happen is the cartel would inform the timeshare owner a buyer's offering a large quantity of money for their timeshare, and when the American agrees, they would tell them there's many international fees and taxes, so they can get their money, but they have to pay these fees and taxes. Because all these call centers were reputable companies, the Americans would agree and instantly start paying these fees. And you guessed it, the share was never actually sold. The cartel just took the money they got from the fees, and that was that. The CJNG would milk this scam as long as they could. They would keep calling the timeshare owner, telling them that they sent the money through a check, but the check got held up at the border, and the timeshare owner would have to send more money to get the check released. At one point, there's a man named Steve, and this man ended up sending $1.8 million from this scheme, hoping one day he would get this check, but it never happened. Steve initially thought he sold his timeshare and sent over the fees to the cartel, but he quickly realized that this was a scam after he sent a lot of money and never received the check. The CJNG stopped asking him for money. However, a few months later, the CJNG came up with a brilliant idea. They called Steve back, saying, They were the victim's defense institution, and they worked for the government and saw that he got scammed from his timeshare. And they said they have a lawyer ready to bring this case to court. However, they need Steve to send money for the lawyer fees. And boom, Steve got right back into it, sending money over to the cartel. So yes, this scam is insanely profitable for the cartel, and it's working well. They are expanding into more tourist areas like Cancun, where a lot of Americans own timeshares, and performing the scam on American after American. The worst part about this is because these car centers were once reputable businesses before the cartel took over, these call centers have all kinds of information on American citizens, including where they live, social security numbers, credit card info, general info, and yeah, it's just not a good situation. The CJNG is getting way more powerful by the day, and they found a way to scam Americans in their own home. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.